Hey, what's up, everybody? Cam Hemphill here, your host of the Medical Millionaire podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. My goal is to give incredible value and insight for practice owners. I want to help you scale, I want to help you grow, and potentially even sell, right? And so we are currently living in a environment where we have AI coming at a very fast pace. We have science, we have innovation of healthcare. It's chaotic right now, and it feels like we're living in this massive innovation experience world and journey together. And we're trying to figure it all out, right? How do we operate as systems owners? How do we know what KPIs and metrics to hit? How do we know how to manage our inventory control? And so today, guys, I have an incredible guest on. Him and I have had great conversations. He's been in the industry for a long period of time. I'll let him drill in on his background a little bit more. But he has launched a company that solves a very unique problem that has been needed for years. And I want to welcome Niklas Hess. He's the founder of Medvelle.ai. Their mission is to help us solve really the hidden cost of goods and how we manage inventory. And he can obviously expand on that. Niklas, dude, appreciate it. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cam. Much appreciated. Excited to be here. And yeah, indeed, exciting times, I would say, in all things AI and in the space. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You guys should see his background if you're watching online. He's in New York City, and there's just these massive buildings behind him. So super jealous. Love New York, man. That's a pretty cool place to have your HQ.
We've been very happy, and as a company, our HQ is New York, right on Fifth Avenue, and then we have a second location in Madrid, Spain, which has been equally fun. Phenomenal talent over there, and the food is not too bad either. um, And I think most importantly for us is, we see ourselves as a service forward company. And so having almost 24/7 coverage, for clients by having the two time zones has been really instrumental. And so this background is great. Next time we speak, maybe you'll see a background in Spain instead.
Yeah, we'll do an on-site at your location in Spain. How about
There we
that?
go.
There we go.
Love it.
Well, cool, man. Well, hey, tell us more about you. I mean, I know that you're well known in the industry. You guys are venture backed. You guys are doing some amazing things. You have some great logos and names that are using your product. But tell us more about you, your background, and ultimately why Medville came to market.
Absolutely. So actually goes back a long, long time. I come from four generations of doctors. I'm the first one in that lineage not to be a doctor. And, I think there was always this itch to go back into the space and be more involved in that direction. I grew up under the front desk, heard my parents, talk about the glove supplies and, the Botox that didn't get delivered and so on. My mother actually owns her own aesthetic practice, so I felt very closely connected to this space specifically. And yeah, came to the US, did my master's here and joined a private equity firm. And in early 2023, we were looking to do a roll up. That was really the target. So really, buying smaller practices, improving efficiency and moving really far ahead with that. Um, Once we were close to acquiring our very first practice, I said, hey, let me actually go in there and work with them for a couple of weeks. And very quickly realized that inventory and procurement particularly was an absolute nightmare. I mean, sticky notes all over the place, open closet policies, individuals that were ordering that had no business to order without any kind of approval workflows around it. And so, I went to the owner and I said, beyond the process side of things, which we can fix, could you guys please, give me your accrued cost of goods sold? Can you get me your current inventory levels? What are your shrinkage rates? All of those items.
Mhm.
And, the person stopped me and said, before you go any further, can you explain to me what accrual cost of goods sold really are? And, I was like, oh boy, this is, not, we're very much earlier than we should be with this. And so instead of buying practices, we ultimately went a step further and, dove into developing Medvelle, which is an inventory and procurement manager, particularly for the aesthetic and wellness space, at this point at least. And, to solve that exact issue for those people that were going to be, buying practices, growing practices, and building incredible businesses in this space. And so we've been very, very fortunate in this space. Medvelle has now been around for a longer period of time. We've grown to over 30 people as a team and, are now, as of, I believe, the end of January, supporting over 1,000 locations across the country, which has been an absolute amazing experience. And yeah, so that's a little bit of background on Medvelle itself.
Yeah, fantastic. Hey, congratulations. I love founder stories. Really, it's like, hey, you went in, you were going to close on a practice. This is a whole idea, and you pivoted. You pivoted and said, wait a minute, this is a problem. Was there a point where you went back to the partners that you were working with and said, we're going to change our focus. We're not closing on this deal. I have a new idea, and we're going to solve a bigger problem for 1,000 practices now. That's going to obviously grow. Walk me through that. I'm always curious to know the pivot and then the growth factors.
Yeah, absolutely. Companies talk about pivots all the time, like it's something to be proud of. Actually, I have a little bit of a different view there, right? I think when you pivot, it means that where you might have been initially wrong, right, or wrong about your own, ideas and skill set and so on. And so it was actually not that easy of a conversation or even a mental process for me, right? Because you've put so much work into one direction, you've done all the research, you've gone obviously out and sourced deals and leads and so on, and to then come back and say, I actually think that this wild idea that nobody else has done this before, but we think it's going to be really valuable, right? It was important there. I was very fortunate that the private equity firm or family office I was with was incredibly supportive, and without them, we wouldn't be where we are right now, clearly. And they said, look, you know, move on this. And if it looks successful and it looks like it's a good idea, we would be happy to support that. And they ended up being our very first investor as well, and really have supported us from day one through that. I think the other important part is to have mentors and people around you that are able to give you input and feedback on things that might sound good, but then in reality don't turn out that way, is absolutely important, right? And so for us, that meant really, critically looking at the way that, inventory and procurement works in the space, the important vendors and how we can add value to that was, not just a thing overnight and you start ordering, but it was, tons of conversations and a deeper understanding in the space, where again, that family office was instrumental in doing that with us. So that's kind of how that ultimately came about. Once we got started, I sourced a list of all med spas in the country and walked around New York City and tried to get them to agree to work with me as someone without any, proper experience or any, reason to really be in the business. And within the first, 1 or 2 weeks, we sourced 6, 7, deals that ultimately, signed up with us. And truthfully, I thought we were somewhat of a failure at that point. I think 6 or 7 now sounds pretty good in the context of the space, but to be who came from more high velocity, investing and so on, it was definitely not the quantity that I thought would be appropriate until I spoke to a laser rep in the space, and this laser rep really probably instrumental of again why we're here today. Said, "You guys got 6 or 7 within 1 or 2 weeks. And how many people did you visit? I don't know, 40, 50." They're like, "That's unbelievable. Our close rate is less than 1%. This is like whatever you have there, go deeper into it." And I think, that was the moment when it really clicked for us on, okay, the space actually needs this. Without any reputation, without, a fleshed out product, we were able to do this. And then it's really when we then went deeper into it and started building the product the way it looks today.
That's amazing. I love it. It's a wonderful founder, story journey. Quickly finding a problem, doing a roll up, changing, having partners that believe in you, back you, and then leaning in on industry expertise. I mean, one lens you could say, hey, this is a failure. We're talked to 50 people, we've closed 6. Right when you said that, I immediately was like, wow, that's really good. Obviously, there's a solution here to solve serious problems. I mean, it's hard to even walk into a practice and have, the really the person that's going to make the ultimate decision be available to have the conversation. This is a pretty sophisticated conversation, right? And so I think that's huge. Also, it gives you the opportunity to have boots on the ground and go through those pain points, those experiences. And so that's what I love about founder operators is there's a hustle in you, right? There's a hustle to solve, and the founders just go on to make creative things and wonderful things for practice owners in this particular case that solve problems. And so what I want to talk about next is really the core theme of this conversation and why you exist, right? It's from my understanding, and you can obviously build on this, is there is a massive, I would say, opportunity in the hidden cost of goods, right? You have practice owners that are ordering from multiple vendors. Some of these products have shelf life. And you also have reps that are coming into these practices with discounts and BOGOs and promos and buy this now. And a practice owner is probably on one side saying, sounds great. I'll buy it now because I can get a discount. I'll throw it on the shelf. But they're also like, should I buy it? What does my cash reserves look like? They're probably looking at their bank account, their credit card statement. They're not looking at their P&L, their balance sheet, right? And so for one, they probably have never even been trained on how to properly inventory. And for two, now they have a tool. So I really want you to talk us through that, right? The true hidden cost of goods and how Medville solves and attacks that problem.
No, it's a fantastic question. I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. And this is one of our earlier clients. I walked in the door, we were implementing the solution, and in their supply room, there was this box in the corner. And that box was full of filler boxes, like, filler packaging. And at first, I thought these were all the empty ones, and maybe they were keeping them for some compliance reasons or whatever else, until I picked one of them up and they were full. That was, the product was still in there. And so I asked them, why is this in a box here, not in the, the actual closets, properly put away? And they said, well, all of these are expired. And I said, can you put an estimate on how much value is in this box, right? If we were to have sold it. And they said, well, we can't talk about the value of how much we would have sold it for, because that depends on, how we price it. But it's probably about $50,000 worth of product sitting. And my jaw just dropped to the floor, right? Because yes, it was a large practice and obviously performing exceptionally well, but that's $50,000 right there of just lost money. Like that should have been on the bottom line. That should have been, profit. That's just completely left it. And so, when we think about hidden costs in this space, that's one of the, big ones is, overbuying and then having expirations and that stuff being thrown away. But we see a ton of different ones on top of that, right? I mean, on the complete flip side to it is understocking, right? Where you lose revenue because, you don't have the product you need in that moment. Then emergency order it to try and get it shipped next day to have it there for when the client walks in. You spend extra money on shipping if you're lucky that it actually arrives at the right time, right? That's not guaranteed. And so that's another one that we see. For me personally, though, I think the most important one is the level of time and mental energy that's wasted on the inventory process, right? And when we look at practices, we see, owners that are knee deep in this, right? Where I look at it from a founder perspective and I say, well, my time is better spent thinking about the next person we recruit and training the people and, moving sales along and so on. And so the amount of time spent on pretty meaningless tasks, right? Like, logging into Amazon and, doing orders on there is really crazy. But it trickles down from there even further, right? It is, the staff members that need to count on a weekly basis, right? And do so inefficiently, maybe with a piece of paper and then it gets translated over. It is the accountants that try and reconcile things in the end, but have a really hard time doing it and probably just somewhat wing it. And then it's the long-term cost of when you want to sell your practice. If you don't know what your accrual COGS appropriately is, and you're just trying to average it out, like you really don't know your profitability appropriately, which means a potential buyer is going to discount that down. And so all of these are problem statements that we see that are not even, right, the most obvious one of just I'm paying too much for product, right? That's a clear one, right? I'm buying inefficiently, right? I'm spending too much money. I haven't negotiated my prices. That's the obvious one, right? But beyond those, you really have the kind of optimization side of things, overstock or understock. You have the time saving side of things, right? And the waste on that front as well. And so that's really what we have seen on kind of the reason of why you see so much, leakage, if you want, on margin. And when we came in, we said, okay, how do we resolve this? Because it's not just a question of like, let me buy this more efficiently for you, or let me give you some insights in your inventory. It needs to be a holistic solution that covers everything of inventory in one place. And so to give a tiny bit of background on Medvelle, we see ourselves as essential inventory and procurement manager, right? Think about us like the Amazon of the aesthetic space, where a location can buy everything they need in one place. Injectables, retail, consumables, even snacks for the team, all in one platform. But beyond the purchasing itself, it manages your entire inventory. So the moment something gets delivered, it automatically increases your inventory up. It connects to your POS system and automatically tracks consumption based on the services you're performing. It then makes smart recommendations, AI-driven recommendations of what to order and when. It executes the orders on your behalf, and then it does all the financial reconciliation and operational reconciliation that's needed until delivery again. So from delivery over consumption to, the recommendations and ordering to reconciliation and delivery again, everything covered in one platform. And that's how we think those three main problems can be resolved: the inefficient purchasing on pricing, the waste on the optimization side of things with overstock and understock, and the last one being the time wasted of team members.
You mentioned margin leakage, and I think that's a big one. I'm sure, yeah, out of the amount of rooftops you have, over 1,000 units, that are inside the ecosystem, do you have a theme that you see that's consistent on the amount of margin that is being leaked per rooftop? Like, what is the true opportunity there?
Several percentage points. It obviously depends on how well run the practice is before, right? I mean, we see clients that are improving, 5, 6 percentage points in the end because they just had stuff being stolen all the time and no understanding of their margin appropriately, and because of that, not just having shrinkage, but also offering services that actually didn't make them any money, where they just needed to pivot over or adjust pricing on it. And then obviously there are much better run practices, right, where the margin opportunity lies less in the direct margin improvement, but more on the owner having more time available right now because they were the ones who monitored this, right, to the T. And so they did a great job before, right? But, their time was probably better spent somewhere else. And then, we love to see, hey, inventory does stay the same, margin improves maybe slightly, but your revenue starts going up because now you have time to be, working on the business instead of in the business.
How much time is the product typically saving a practice owner?
So we see over 50% of time savings based on what was spent before. Now, when you think about a specific single location practice, right, based on the data that we have collected, there's typically about 50 hours of time spent on inventory and procurement, right? And that's really between staff members, managers, owners, accountants, and so on. It's less when you talk about multi-location groups because there's obviously some shared efficiencies that come with that. But from there, the time savings are material. And yeah, for us, it's over 50% that we see.
Okay, so let's just put some math behind this, right? Let's just say that's currently it's 50 hours. You cut that in half, for example, right? I think that's what you said. So let's just say you cut that in half. For the audience, if you are a provider that is doing this, a provider owner that's doing this, and you are spending 50 hours a month on inventory, let's just take that half. Let's just say you're spending 25 hours. And what he's saying there is that's a combined effort from you communicating back and forth with the vendor, putting it on the shelf, delegating a task to the front desk, the accountant has to touch it. What is the cost per hour that you're putting into that? And if you're a high, producing provider, I know some providers that are making $1,200, $1,300, $2,000 an hour. Let's just peg that at a low base. That's $500 an hour, right? So now do the math. Take 25 hours times 500. This is a massive opportunity that you can then actually go deploy that opportunity to something else, right? So let's obviously not lose mind of the opportunity that is exposed by letting a specific product manage that. I think it's great, Niklas. I think it's fantastic. This is a serious issue, and it's really in the hidden cost of not having efficiencies with having an application like what you guys have. Um, the other thing you said, a couple percentage points of margin. If you're okay with that, I'd like to put some math numbers, some dollars behind that, right? And because that can mean a world of difference. And maybe this could be kind of a fun exercise. We could take that all the way up to what it does on enterprise value creation, right? Because every point on EBITDA means multiple dollars. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
100%. It's actually a really good point, and I don't think a lot of people understand it because on the one hand, you obviously want to improve your EBITDA, right? And not just on a dollar to dollar basis, but also on a percentage basis, right? The other thing that you just kind of started to allude to is you are valued as a multiple of EBITDA, right? So yes, by improving your EBITDA, you are increasing your enterprise value, but also by having better processes, clear data, right? You're going to improve your multiple because the buyer is going to come in and say, okay, am I taking a big risk here? Because it's kind of like a black box and I still need to figure out, like, is this actually true? Are these numbers true? Like, how much of this is real? Or am I, fairly certain or very certain that what I'm buying is exactly what you're telling me it is in the end? And so, it is very hard to put a multiple improvement on having these kinds of processes in place. But even if you go very low, right, and you say, look, it's a multiple improvement of 0.5, let's say, because we have tight processes, we know all of our numbers, we're certain on our margin, and it can be replicated afterwards, right, whether the owner is there or not, right? And let's say you are a practice that generates, $200,000 in EBITDA in the end, right? That right there is $100,000 lift in your enterprise value, right? I would hope that a lot of the people that are probably listening to this as well might be, above that $200,000 mark, maybe materially above that, right? And so you can run that math. That's a significant chunk of cash to think about in the future. That doesn't even include the actual dollar EBITDA improvement that can come from that. Yeah.
So, it's you guys, it's revenue can go up while profitability actually goes down, right? And most people don't catch that. I hear this all the time. Nicholas is, oh, our numbers are up, we're growing. And I'm always asking, sometimes depending on the appropriate conversation who I'm with, what do you mean? Please drill into that. Well, our sales are up. Okay, cool. What about your profitability? Is that going up with your revenue, or is it going down? Like, how efficient are you running? Most of the time, I don't get a response, or I'm not sure. And so I think you really, for the audience, guys, what he's getting at is these practices, you guys, when you trade, if you ever trade, I'm sure you will. There's always an expiration date. I always say that. I hope you're building your practice to the highest enterprise value you possibly can, because you're selling time, you're trading dollars for time. You're literally saying, in some cases, I'm not going to attend this family event or this kid function because I'm going to give my time to a patient. I would assume you want to maximize that enterprise value of time. And so they trade on EBITDA, right? And what he's saying there is really like, let's just call it net income, just to make the conversation easy. It's, if you're doing $1 million and you are taking home 200,000, it's a 20% operating business. Every time your net income or EBITDA goes up, you get a higher valuation. So I would encourage every practice owner to really be looking at your profitability. That is your enterprise value. And the higher you can keep your profitability is going to show you how good of an operator you truly are, right? You can be the best salesperson in the world and have hundreds and thousands of patients coming in, and it's all a wonderful thing. And that's great. Like, you need that engine as well, but you have to have an operating engine inside the practice in order to be successful, build enterprise value, all these things. Um, so I want to talk a little bit more about that in particular, and why do you think, Nicholas? Why do growing clinics, right? Why do you think they struggle with profitability?
It's a really, really good question. And it actually reminds me of something that we saw as a hypothesis pretty early on, which is, for many years now, the market has been so focused on revenue, right? Like, how do we increase revenue and so on. And I think last year, maybe a little bit the year before, we started to hear much more this conversation about efficiency happen, right? Like, you go to MSPA or, MSS, and, more of the sessions were suddenly about, like the actual efficiency of the practice I'm running. And I think there's a couple of reasons why that has happened, and I'm going to get into why I think people are struggling with this. I want to think, one, the market is incredibly competitive, and so getting new revenue in the door is becoming harder and harder to maybe what it was before. Now, we have a little bit different view on it. I think there's some natural selection here that happens. Our clients are performing exceptionally well. I mean, just this year, the growth rates we have seen have been mind-blowing. And again, I think there's a selection here of people that are, process driven, that want a technology solution, and because of that are doing really, really well. But I think the general market, it might not be that easy anymore to grab a new patient, or it's getting harder. And so, if that's part is harder, then let's focus on what ultimately actually drives the enterprise value, which is let's improve that efficiency and the profitability. I think the reason why that's so difficult for people to do, kind of to your question, is multiple. There's multiple. One is you typically have operators that are not trained in this, right? You might have somebody who used to be a phenomenal injector, that has built an incredible book of business and has started to build a business. But the difficulties of hiring appropriately, managing your inventory, managing your finances, right? Thinking about capital allocation when it comes to devices and so on, right? Like, that's a difficult thing. It's a very different way of thinking and a very different work stream. And so I think that's one of the reasons why that has been so difficult. I think the second one, truthfully, is just, it's a hard problem to solve, right? Like, you think about having 25 different vendors that you work with, or 20 different vendors you work with. It's a really difficult thing to try and understand how across the 400 SKUs that I have in my location, right? what is the efficient amount that I should have? What optimizes my cash flow versus my, stock level availability? And, how ultimately should I be thinking about promotions and, when I should take advantage of those? What are the incentives and how those align? And so I think it's a combination of maybe not having the skill set on it, right, on that specific item and needing that external support. And the second thing, it just being a really, really difficult problem to solve, particularly in this industry, in that space of why, yes, it's a big conversation now, but we still have a long way to go on that.
It's a full-time job. I mean, it's difficult to solve. It's a full-time job. Obviously you guys have great tech around it that supports that, right? But if you're a practice owner, a provider owner, practice that's seeing patients all day, um, you are busy. I mean, you're constantly busy seeing patients, constantly busy. So depending on the velocity of patients that are coming in, I have a practice that I work with very closely, and I have one provider there that's seeing 15 to 20 patients a day. She's great. She's a wonderful earner for the practice. She's the owner too. When is she going to have time to do this? She also has 4 kids, by the way. She's married. I wouldn't name any names, but where's the time? Oh, by the way, you need to post on social media. You need to run your marketing. You need to know your P&Ls. Like, there's just no time. And so the audience knows I'm a massive fan of tech and process automation, especially for practice owners, because of the amount of limited availability that they have, right? And so, guys, if you just stay with me here for a second, I'm becoming more and more of a believer that every practice actually needs an operator. And here's what happens that from my vision of why I wouldn't say failure, but where there's inefficiencies and opportunity is you bring in a front desk person. That front desk person typically is not trained. You level them up, you train them. Typically, they're underpaid, they're undercompensated. There's no performance-based compensation for one, so they're already trained inadequately out of the gates. Then they've been there for a year or two, and they need to become office manager because they want to raise, right? And so you make them office manager. Now you just gave them a managerial position, and they're not trained for that. Now they're managing inventory and they're doing all sorts of stuff. You handle the marketing person, you handle the finance guy, you handle ordering inventory, whatever it is. But there's no benchmarks, there's no KPIs. They're just taking direction from you, and they're getting paid more. So where do you go from there? Right? Is the question. Is I see practices all the time go front desk to office manager, and then office manager does not have the business acumen to understand how to operate an efficient business. And these businesses are doing 3, 4, 5, $6 million in top line revenue. This is a serious business, right? Like, okay, there's bigger businesses in the world, whatever, but same time, like, let's just talk one rooftop doing $5 million in annual revenue. Like, that business is spitting off great income, right? And that's why you see PE coming in. And so I'm becoming just a massive believer that having an operator with the business acumen injected into your practice, they have the time. They can be remote, whatever, to say, you know what? I can look at your inventory process. Oh yeah, broken. Okay, we need Medville. You know what? Your marketing isn't efficient. You're not spending enough. Okay, you need this company. Oh, you know what? Your EMR is not giving you the right data reports. You don't have the right fractional CFO or CFO at all. Your books are out of line. I'm really starting to become a massive believer in this operational role because they have the time to connect with tech and tools that you guys provide, right? So I'll leave it at that, guys. But anyway, I went on for the tangent there for a sec. Niklas, tell us how it works. Tell us how it works, because they have PMS system, EMR, CRM. How does it work? Does it sit on top of the EMR? Is it injected? There's AI to it. Like, talk to us about that.
It's a fantastic question. Yeah, so we connect to your point of sale system or EMR. Most of the time, those are one and the same at this point in time. And with that, understand what you're doing in your day to day as a practice. However, we believe that the inventory itself should sit completely external to that, right? Which sits in Medvelle in the end in our system and really needs to be managed end to end. And so the way we really look at that is to understand what products are you actually consuming for each service that you're providing, right? That's a critical understanding. We have obviously, a ton of in-house tools that we built around this, or AI models that have been built around this understanding, right? Which only gets better as we continue to grow as a company. But then equally importantly, it's trying to understand what you're going to be consuming in the future, right? So now we understand what you consumed in the past. Now we need to predict what you're consuming in the future. And that's really, another set of AI tools that we have built internally that is forecasting your actual expected consumption of products. which ultimately reflects in the recommendations that we make to practice what they need to buy and when. And there's an example of that I always like to give, which is, when you talk to a typical inventory person, they're going to tell you, but what are my par levels? And when we came into the space, maybe a little bit naively so, but we didn't quite understand par levels, and we said, why are these people talking about par levels all the time, right? Such a static number. If you're growing your business super quickly, well, par levels of this week might be completely out of date, right? Come the next month because you just grew like crazy, or because your service mix has shifted or something else. And so, as an example of that forecasting is we work with something called par weeks. So we look at exactly how many weeks of inventory you should have on hand. And then based on those forecasts, able to tell you what you should be ordering to be appropriately stocked to that. And so, when we think about building AI and interacting with clients, it is not a service that says you're completely out of the loop and you have no control over it, right? It is optimizing the insights that you already have for yourself. And so you can, for example, in our system, customize your own AI and customize kind of, how aggressive do you want the inventory to be? How many weeks do you want to have on hand and so on? And then the system takes that input and runs with it and makes these recommendations of what to order and when that get to be reviewed by the location and ultimately approved and then placed. As the placement happens, right, that's kind of when the next, set of tools comes. You're talking about at this point over 600 vendors that we work with across the country that are approved vendors, plus another handful that are very unique to specific clients, small vendors down the road, mom and pop shops, right, and so on, that all need to be supported, right? So it's understanding how can you efficiently purchase from them, right, in an automated fashion, and make sure that from an operational and a financial perspective, the orders are happening the way they should. And so we call, on our end, do matching, right? So we understand, hey, what was requested? Is that what the vendor confirmed? Is that what was ultimately shipped? Is that what was invoiced? And is that what ultimately was paid, right? All of these things need to line up. And there's, again, models in the background that help with that. And then the last piece to it, right, is the financial reconciliation behind it, is understanding, okay, now I know what I had consumed, what I needed, what I bought, that all of that is accurate. Now, what does that translate to from a data perspective in my business, right? And that's a question of what's my accrued cost of goods sold? What's my margin per service? What are my shrinkage rates, right? How many weeks of inventory do I have on hand and so on? And so kind of, leading back to your question on, okay, how does it work? It's a suite of solutions that work hand in hand in order to make sure that ultimately what you need for your business is fully managed from the consumption part all the way over back to kind of the data that then provide the insights to make better decision moving forward. All of those supported by AI, right? Or AI models and tools to make them as efficient as possible. Yeah.
Okay, so if I order from Galderma, Allergan, neurotoxins filler, let's just use that for an example. Can I still order from them, or do I have to go outside into your system? Is it so? Talk to us about that.
So that's all fully supported. What's really important here, you continue to keep your relationships and your contracts. And so it's actually another funny anecdote. My when I launched the company, my mother gave me a call. She's like, "It's a wonderful idea, but I'm never going to use your service." It's like, "Oh my God, why? How could you say this?" And she's like,
Come
"You need
on,
to
mom.
understand exactly, please." And she's like, "You need to understand that." The relationship with the reps and the relationship with those vendors is one of the most important, if not the most important relationship in this market. And whatever service you're providing needs to support that relationship and grow it. And so we have taken the approach very early on to be very, very rep forward and to really, really care about that relationship and support that relationship really deeply. And so what that means is if you want to order Allergan, that is absolutely available in the system. And more importantly than that, it's even available to go directly through your rep still with your involvement to make sure that that rep, is the active point of contact on that. And so the system does not take away any workflows or tries to override them or do anything difficult with that, right? It is tying into the operational workflows that you already have to support your business, not to try and change everything because we think we know better. Because truthfully, what I've learned about the space now at this point in time, most vendors that come in and pretend like they know better probably don't, because there's a reason why, these individuals have built $1 million businesses and have done, such an exceptional job. It's our job to help them, to provide them the tools to do better. It's not to rewrite everything overnight and think that, us as individuals can do better.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think that's great. Yeah, the vendors have great relationships with the practices and personal relationships. They've been providing the products and they show up to their location. There's there's handshakes there, there's hugs there, there's gifts there. I also hear, where vendors will give away product or sample product, or and that can lower their overall cost of goods that are sitting on the at the practice. How is that handled? Is it handled? I'm not even.
Absolutely. Fully handled in the system. And probably one of the most important pieces that these practices need to get right, and probably one of the biggest gaps right now, right, is the appropriate tracking of samples. And there's really two reasons of why that matters on the sample side. Is the very obvious one is it's for financial reasons, right? If these are samples that are legally allowed to be utilized, right, you want to track that. You want to track the margin impact that that has, right? You want to make sure that you know that these are not just used by your staff, right, on personal reasons, but they're actually leveraged for the business the appropriate way and for the purpose that they're meant for. And so that's tracked in the system from a financial perspective, right? They can be treated in whatever way is wants to be treated by the practice, and then also included in all the financial reporting. The second one, right, or the second reason why that's so important is because there's a compliance question to this, right? There are states that don't allow the usage of samples of specific products, right? Or where there's much more nuance around how that can be utilized. And so for a practice to be able to go in and say, hey, I have all the records to show you exactly where those samples are, how they've been utilized, and where they're stored, and how much of that we have, and so on and so forth, is absolutely critical. And so we look at it both from the financial kind of accounting and operational perspective, as well as that compliance perspective. That's absolutely critical.
That's a huge part. I hear it all the time. Well, I mean, my cost of goods are wide, but I get so much sample product, so I can bring it down. Our numbers are kind of skewed. I don't know if I've met a practice owner that could say, "Here's the number. This is the number. This is the number." And so, if I'm hearing you right, this also rolls into some financial report that can then be
Absolutely.
pushed to QuickBooks or some sort of external financial system or delivered to a financial CFO.
That's exactly it. So connected to Sage, NetSuite, QuickBooks, you name it, right? And reporting that is cleanly available to show, your margin per service, any sample impact on margin, right? We have actually a report built around that specifically. And this is like, especially private equity groups care a lot about that, right? Where they want to understand, okay, like what has been that impact on my margin, right? How large is it, right? And how does that tie into the rebate structures we already have, and so on. And so, yeah, all of that is readily available in the system. And I think the most exciting conversations I have is with owners that really start leveraging those reports and like start digging into the details and say, okay, I now have the time back that I'm going to redeploy to build a better business by getting a better understanding of, the margins I'm actually making, and, the impact that, I can have on the business with those things.
Are you guys thinking about spitting out any insights, or maybe you already do, in terms of benchmarks? You're above, you're below. Here's what success looks like.
Absolutely. And we work with, obviously some of the largest groups in the space, and, where there's so many locations, 60, 70, hundreds of locations, under one roof, where, we actively work with clients to understand where, the opportunities lie. Multi-location owners, right, that want to understand that. Actually, I'll give you a live example of that. This is one of my favorite stories. And, people who have maybe seen me on stage somewhere, so I might have heard the story already, but we call it the toilet paper story. It's one of multi-location owner where the smallest location was using double the amount of toilet paper to the largest location. Sounds so trivial, right? And such a nuisance in a way. But it's a reflective of something probably a little bit deeper, and two, something that should be taken action on. And so those are then the comparisons you can make between the locations and get a better understanding of, okay, I am using more of product X in one location than the other beyond a reasonable threshold that just doesn't make sense. The system flags this out, by the way. In this case, it flagged it out to the owner. The owner started to store the toilet paper in a different location of the practice, and suddenly consumption went back down to normal. And so those are the insights that are absolutely needed, proactively needed, in order to run a better business.
That's where, I mean, all the hard work that you're doing, that's what you want, right? To actually uncover the opportunity, give them the detail, and say, okay, go make the changes here. I love it. And I think one other thing that came to my mind too, as we were going through this, love the conversation. This is fantastic. Really appreciate what you guys are doing. Is there's also providers that work inside of a practice that they either get a deal on the product, right? Because they work there as employees. I've seen everything across the board here, where there's certain dollars are earned on how many hours you worked, or you get a coupon, or it's a percentage off retail. I've even heard you get free product if you work here. And so I'm just over here thinking that there's got to be Do you guys track anything on that regard? Like, hey, this was used for our internal staff.
Absolutely. It's actually very critical, right? Is kind of the discounting or the, special checkouts, if you want to call it that, right? That make a massive difference in the end. And so like a lot of individuals are kind of back of the envelope saying, well, I sell this product for price X and I bought it for price Y. And so my margin is this. And then you start digging in and start factoring all of these details and, okay, X, but I discount on average 25%. All right, that's already looking a little different. And then, on the Y side, I'm not factoring in shipping costs and, taxes appropriately. And so that number is not much higher. And now you look at the real margin that's left in the end, right? And that's a very different number than the back of the envelope math might have, suggested at first. And so staff treatments, for example, or friends and family or influencer treatments or whatever that might be, right? If you do a lot of those, they might not be obvious at first, but you run that in the data, you start looking, what that actually does to your margin. And a lot of owners are surprised and I would say shocked at times with kind of where that money is flowing. And from a personal perspective, I think back, to my family, you pour your blood, sweat, and tears into this business, right? Like you work as hard as you possibly can. Every dollar that isn't going in the right direction is essentially dollars out of your pocket, out of your future, enterprise value, which is upsetting, right? If that isn't done the right way. And when, people take advantage of that and you don't even know what's happening in the background. And so, yeah, this is a very long-winded answer to saying 100% that needs to be tracked. And I actually think it's an insight that's critical for most owners to have.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think in the next, as we look at the advancement of operations, efficiencies, ordering of inventory, managing patients, EMRs, CRMs, all the tools that it takes to run an effective practice. You know, I think that in the cutting edge of AI today, uh, there's massive amounts of interesting products coming into the industry. And some are going to do very well, and some maybe go by the wayside depending on how they're managed, operating, their problems, gaps, they solve all this stuff. I see the entire landscape in the next 36 to 60 months being completely reshaped from AI operating systems. From when a lead hits, it's going to get booked, and people are going to be okay talking to voice agents because voice agents they don't have bad days, and they have a standard way of thinking. I'm okay actually talking to, like, dude, I'll call Delta or I'll chat with Delta through their chat. It's actually very efficient, very fast to get the answers I want and need. I think there's some kinks to work out there, obviously, but then I also want the system to connect with me when I want to be rebooked. I want my inventory to be managed and just have it run more efficiently. That doesn't mean that we're going to work our way out of the jobs. It's going to actually open up opportunity for us to build a relationship based business, which is what medical aesthetics is all about. Is helping individuals achieve who they want to be, right? The next best version of them, feeling well and looking well. What is your take on AI in the next 36 months, 60 months? What is your outlook there?
I think you are spot on. I think we're going to see a massive shift in not just this industry, obviously globally, right? But I think this industry particularly is ripe for additional tools and support with that. Just because when you look at what currently is out there from a technology perspective, truthfully, it's archaic, right? Like the tools you currently get out there are not up to par on where I think this industry can be. And I think we should all be excited because these tools are going to make us a better industry, more efficient operators, and leverage time more efficiently. I'll also say that at least we as a company have a um, somewhat unique view on how AI companies should be built in this space and how technology companies in the space should be acting. And that really comes down to, a typical SaaS play of here's your technology platform, run with it. It's on you now to handle this, and the amount of work that needs that goes into it. And what we think is the better approach of being a very service forward company, right? You should not be selling a tool anymore. You should be selling a service, right? An end-to-end managed experience. That's something that we've believed since inception of the business. It's why, I think clients enjoy working with us and why they stick with us. But it really means that you need to be there for your client, for the practice, for the owner, whatever that is, every step of the way, and make their life easier, not just give them another login to try and figure out what that means for their practice. And so I think while I'm incredibly excited what is to come, I think the processes, the tools, the AI systems that are coming, the successful ones are going to be the ones that take it from the lens of, let me provide that service to, let me take this off your plate fully, instead of just adding another tool on top of your already pretty fragmented stack, right, to try and run things more efficiently. And, um, I think that we will see play out to then make this industry something that, I hope we're all just hoping for.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if we could solve fragmentation from a lead raising their hand all the way to rebooking them and running the practice internally more efficiently, that is a massive, massive solve. Today a practice needs a set of 3 to 5 tools, call it logins, to run their practice. And I would say outside of that, probably another multiple for ordering products, right? So there's probably 15 to 20 logins to put the marketing stack on that. Shoot, I'm probably undershooting that. It's probably more like 40 to 50 logins. It's like, how many passwords can you save? Remember, the tabs open on the computer. It's really interesting. Hey, man, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining. For if people want to learn more about Medville, what you guys are up to, where you're going to be, maybe they want to see your product after this conversation. Not sure, but where should they go?
They go to Medvelle, MEDV as in Victor, ELLE, .ai or .com, both, or, find us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on any of those platforms and reach out to us. We always love to have conversations with people, right? What we always say is the worst thing that can happen is that we give you some insights that might help you run your practice a little bit better. And the best thing is you might find something that, is a long-term benefit or impact to your practice. But yeah, anybody who's interested would love to talk to them. Cam, I will say, I've been a big fan of your show for a while. I think the understanding of how these insights actually translate to the financials is absolutely critical. And I think where most people just get that wrong. And so thank you very, very much for having me on and for this conversation. It's been really, really a pleasure.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. I'll leave it at that, guys. Go check them out. Go check out their site. They're doing incredible things. He's got an incredible founder. They got a great team. I know some of the team members over there as well, and they're really just trying to help. And I really appreciate that, value that. Guys, go check them out. I'll leave it at that. Until next time, happy injecting.